Good morning, everybody, and welcome. This is Liz Peterson in the studio today. I have Antonia Greene, Shamanic healer and psychotherapist. We're getting ready to start recording our show. Welcome. Antonia has a couple things to share. Antonia, welcome to the studio.
Hi, thank you. Well, I want to share, first of all, a very exciting thing that's happening. I have an upcoming trip to Teotihuacan, Mexico, which is a shamanic journey into the divine feminine for women. It begins on April 21st, so it's pretty late notice for anybody who might be interested in getting a plane ticket and coming down, but we still have a couple of spaces available, so the invitation is there if anyone is interested or curious. Check out my website, www.antoniagreene.com.
Great. Thanks, Antonia. All right, guys, we're getting ready to start the show. Thanks for joining us. Hello and good morning. This is KBSH Voice of Vashon 101.9 FM. This is your host, Liz Peterson of Liz's Healing Touch. I'm an intuitive healer here on Vashon Island. Welcome to today's show. I'm bringing you the psychics, the healers, the way showers, and the light bringers that we have here and around our island. Today, I'll be discussing Toltec Shamanism with Antonia Greene. Looking forward to learning all about this modality, and I hope you enjoy it too. Antonia, welcome to the studio. Antonia Greene is a psychotherapist and a shamanic energy healer with over 30 years experience. She trained in shamanism as an apprentice in the Toltec tradition and went on to study Peruvian shamanism at Alberto Bilaldo's Light Body School, the Four Winds. She traveled to Peru, Mexico, and Colombia to learn indigenous healing techniques and methods with shamans and medicine people and teachers. She has learned to listen to her own inner teacher and now teaches and practices an amalgamation of what she has learned from traditional methods, as well as evolving new vision, working with women in the realm of the divine feminine. She leads groups and workshops on Vashon in Seattle and Mexico and works in private practice as a psychotherapist and shamanist. She lives here on Vashon Island with her husband, golden retriever, 2 cats, and many nature spirits on 5 acres of land. She's also an actor, working with a local professional group, Civic Rep. More information you can find about Antonia is at www.antoniagreene.com. Antonia, welcome to the studio this morning. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz.
So, Antonia, you're a psychotherapist. How long have you been practicing?
Over 30 years. Yeah, long time.
Wow, wonderful. What led you to that?
To psychotherapy?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I started out as an actor. And so, of course, there's in the acting profession, many people think it's all about ego gratification, but actually for me, there was so much depth in understanding how to analyze and break down character and learn what makes people tick. And so I went on out of the need to make a living, because actors don't typically make a living, to becoming a massage therapist. And I did that for a number of years until I realized that I was so interested in watching what kinds of emotions and experiences people were having while they were being worked on the table. And I found that I was more interested in what was happening for them emotionally than the massage therapy techniques. And so I decided to go to graduate school and become a therapist.
Oh.
And then during that time, after I graduated, I became very interested in somatic approaches to psychotherapy.
Okay.
So I did bioenergetic training for about 10 years.
For people who don't know what that is, can you explain what that is?
Well, bioenergetic therapy is the origins of it were from Wilhelm Reich, who worked with Freud, and he worked more with understanding the body processes, including heart rate, breathing, in terms of what was going on for a person in the therapy. And so that was then passed on to Alexander Lowen, who originated bioenergetics. And you might be somewhat familiar with that because I know in your training we did the core work.
Yes, I did.
So it's all the same,
Right.
Same origins. And the thing that was missing for me there was that it was never taken to more of a spiritual level.
Oh, I see. Is that how you got into shamanism?
Well, I've always been a spiritual person, and always had an interest in all things esoteric, and so shamanism, I would say, I think being called to move to the Northwest and being called to nature, maybe was one of the first kind of unconscious signs, of where I was headed. And then I attended a workshop here on Vashon many, many, many years ago. Some of our listeners will remember Trillium Retreat Center, which is no longer. And there was a teacher named Marilyn Timishende who was there just for the weekend. And she was a Toltec teacher. And I signed up just because somebody told me I might be interested.
Mm-hmm.
And
divine intervention.
Yeah, divine intervention. There's a funny story behind that too. But,
I'd love to hear
it. And I had a true shamanic experience during that workshop. It changed my life.
Oh, what does that mean? A true shamanic experience? What does that mean to you?
Okay, well, this teacher did something, a certain kind of ceremony called a mitote, which I offer now every year in the summer.
Oh, I've never heard of that before.
The mitote is it's an all-night dreaming ceremony. And
Nice.
When I was in the process of this dreaming ceremony, I went through, all kinds of machinations of the mind all night long, and at the very end, close to dawn, I had an experience where I experienced time in 3 dimensions. It's really hard to explain, but and some of it is rather personal. So
right.
I'm not going to share exactly what it was, but it was experiencing parts of myself in the past, in the present, and in the future, all at the same time.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And knocked my socks off. And after it was over, this particular teacher disappeared.
Really?
Nobody ever found out what happened to her.
Wow.
Some people say, she died. Some people say she just went off the grid. Some people say she dematerialized. Nobody knows. And so for me, that became a quest. So who's teaching this stuff?
Right.
And where do I find a teacher? And how do I get involved?
Right.
So that led to finding the Toltec path of some of the main apprentices of Don Miguel Ruiz, who wrote the Four Agreements.
Ah, I love that book.
Mm-hmm. And so I started my training in a program with Heather Ashamara. I did that training for a couple of years. Met my dear friend and mentor, Francisco Rico, who sometimes comes as a guest shaman.
Nice.
And
these are
to
all from
Vashon.
the Toltec
These are all
tradition?
Toltec people. And then eventually that led to my apprenticeship with a woman also from that tradition.
Okay. And is she local, or did you have to travel?
I had to travel. She actually came to the island a few times for some workshops.
Oh, wonderful.
I traveled to New Mexico and then began my relationship with
Teotihuacan. And for people who don't know, could you explain a little bit?
Sure. Teotihuacan is a place, a very, very sacred place outside of Mexico City, about an hour and 15 minutes outside the city. Not that many people curiously know about it.
Mm-hmm.
People know about Tulum and Chichen Itza, but this is a place where the pyramids are, and many tribes over thousands of years lived and worked in Teotihuacan.
Okay.
The Mayans, the Aztecs, the Toltecs, the Olmecs, and many more.
Wow. I'm sure it has a strong spiritual background.
It does, yeah.
Great. So what is a shaman to you?
A shaman to me. There are a lot of different definitions of what a shaman is. I like the one more sort of poetic definition is the shaman is one who sees in the dark. And what that means to me is kind of like the owl spirit. There's, as an intuitive healer, you would understand, that there are ways that a shaman is usually very sensitive.
Yes.
And can pick up information, can pick up, intuitively what may be going on in the environment, what may be going on in another person, and then in indigenous cultures, the shaman was actually the one who lived outside the village, who didn't interact very much.
Oh, fascinating. I wasn't aware of that.
And was the one who was the healer, was sometimes, the priest, the intermediary, the one who could bring rain if rain was needed, or whatever was needed in the tribe.
Mm-hmm. On your website, you stated shaman and medicine person as if two different things. Is there a difference?
Well, I've heard it stated that all shaman are medicine people, but not all medicine people are shaman.
Oh,
so what that means is basically, a medicine woman, let's say, or a curandera is one who might work with herbs or healing techniques, but in a very prescribed way. Whereas the shaman has a more extrasensorial, perceptive quality.
Oh, I see.
I think that's maybe how I would explain it.
Which is where the intuition, would come in, I'm guessing. Yeah. So for those who don't know what intuition is, could you explain that a little bit?
Well, intuition is information or sensorial perception that comes in that's not necessarily learned or prescribed in any particular way. In our culture, we're so indoctrinated into the study of things,
Mm-hmm.
and what this means, and the reification of what each thing is and what each thing means. And intuition is kind of the opposite of that. Like, there's no science that can prove, that I perceive that you're a very deep person because you have very deep, beautiful eyes. But and a scientist would say, "Well, prove it."
Right.
Well, we probably could prove it, but that's my instant take. and that's intuition. Like just like if someone walks into a room, we all automatically get a sense of, you know, um, is this person safe? Is this person approachable? Is this person, uh, somebody I want to get to know? You just have this. We all have intuition. Some of us just have more developed intuition.
Do you help people develop their intuition? Is that
I
part
do.
of your practice?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, probably, I guess in all of them, in my psychotherapy practice and my teaching, I think that's probably one of the things that I really do is help people to open to their own inner wisdom, their own inner voice.
Beautiful. Great. So that was going to be my next question is how do you blend the two modalities of psychotherapy and shamanism in your practice?
Sometimes easily and sometimes not so easily. There are ways that they meld very well, and there are other ways that they don't. I would say that probably almost maybe 95% of the time, I'm always using my shamanic skills because I'm always perceiving. And probably most therapists, most depth psychotherapists have that capacity, I would say. Um, and so there are times when, if it seems appropriate, it's not always appropriate, where I might stop a person and say, let's do a grounding exercise, or let's bring you back into yourself, and we'll do a shamanic breathing technique. Or else, there might be times when, it doesn't seem like we're making quite enough headway, and I'll suggest, okay, next time, let's schedule a full-out energy healing session. And that will, that'll require, more. A person is on the table, they're doing deep breath work, and things emerge from that perspective in a way that talk therapy just doesn't access usually.
Interesting.
So, and not everybody is open to that, and I don't do it with people who aren't open to it, but it's an evolution. It's a way of, I used to keep the two very, very separate. And I've been working with integrating the work for many, many years.
Nice. I'm sure the integration is really a body, mind, spirit connection can bring out more for a person.
Definitely.
Great. So the difference, so I read you practice Toltec and Andean shamanism. So what's the difference? Can you explain those?
Well, I just want to, kind of preface that by saying that my practice now really is an amalgamation of those and receiving my own guidance, because I do believe that we're in a shift, and some of the old practices aren't necessarily what we need to do anymore. Like we don't need to bury people alive anymore.
Yes. Thank goodness.
Which is one of the shamanic techniques that we used to use, right? So, we because we can access, I'll call it spirit or divinity or our higher self, or however you want to call it,
right?
Much more quickly now.
I've noticed that as well.
Yeah. So to go back to the Toltec and the Peruvian. So the Toltec is, it's a really difficult thing to define. And people have very different definitions of what Toltec is. There are teachers now that are surfacing. There's one man named Sergio Manana, who is a Mexican man and who has brought back some of the true old Toltec techniques and teachings. I've worked with him a little bit. In my Toltec training, a lot of it was actually very psychological. The Toltec tradition is really about becoming a master artist of your own life. and really all about shifting your perception, shifting your point of view, taking the ego's point of view, right? And so a lot of the work around the Toltec is very, very, very psycho-spiritual, I would say.
Okay.
Whereas in the Peruvian tradition, I was trained in a very traditional way, and it's more of a healing tradition.
Oh, I see.
So where the Toltec left me feeling untrained was that I still wanted healing techniques.
Right.
And so that's where I was given really a map and a very concrete way of working. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful tradition. One of the main concepts of Peruvian shamanism is the concept of Aini. It's A-Y-N-I.
Oh, what's that?
And Aini means right relationship. And so the shaman's imperative is to be in right relationship with all things at all times. And that's really beautiful.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
And so how does that differ from our everyday shamanism that we're used to hearing here in the States?
What do you mean by everyday shamanism?
Well, you hear shaman. Are they the same techniques that you would learn from a shaman here in Washington State who's practicing local tradition?
Not necessarily, because I think that, there's Native American shamanism, which is different, very different, and similar. There are differences and similarities in all of the indigenous.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that so we can maybe find or see a difference between the two?
Well, there are as many forms of shamanism as there are, I don't know, soaps in the drugstore.
Right.
And, there are different flavors and different ways of working. One of the things that I've been very respectful of is the idea of misappropriation. And so I've shied away from Native American shamanism only because I haven't been invited. And
right.
So I went to the trainings and the places that I felt called and invited into. And those are the ones I know, and those are the ones I can really speak to.
Right.
So I can say, so here's a difference. In some of the Native American sweat lodges, in the Lakota tradition, they're very, very intense, very, very hot. They're very, very, it's kind of an endurance test kind of a thing. In the traditional curanderismo, Mexican tradition of sweat lodge, they're much more gentle. They're more about kind of gentle clearing.
I see.
And so that's the I can't even think of the name of the sauce we do right now. It's just right at the top of my head. They use herbs. They hang herbs in the sweat lodge, and the herbs are cleansing as the heat comes up, and you can come and go. It's not an.
I can almost feel it as you were describing it. It sounds wonderful.
It's very heart-centered. Yeah. So and there's no better or worse or good or bad. It's just different. There are different outcomes and different intentions.
Okay.
And and the differences in indigenous shamanism are as different as the culture that they're in.
Right.
Right. And the needs of that culture.
Right. Okay, so you were discussing some of the indigenous techniques and methods that you use. Can you describe some of those?
Well, so I have brought some of my accoutrement. And
we have shamanic tools
yes,
in the studio today. They're beautiful.
Yes,
Super excited.
I call it the path of paraphernalia because there's so much stuff, but it's fun stuff. So I have one of my main tools is my rattle. It's like I brought a very gentle rattle.
Nice.
And the rattle is used for many purposes. One purpose is to it actually, like when you rattle over someone's body, you actually start to change the vibration of the energy around that person's body.
Right.
And so when I start an energetic clearing or an energetic session, I always start with a good rattle session. And it actually changes brainwaves. So does the drum.
Nice.
And then we also use it. To open chakra. So the chakras are the energy centers in the body, which you well know.
Oh yes, thank you for
describing. And when we open the chakra, we use the rattle. So the rattle actually pulls what we call, I don't like to call it negative energy. I like to call it dense energy. Okay. So the dense energies just kind of pull out.
Those lovely little things you don't need anymore.
The sound, right? The stuff we don't need anymore.
Nice.
So that would be one, one technique. The other is, of course, the shaman's drum, which, in some traditions, the northern, particularly the Siberian traditions, the drum is everything. The drum is a living being. So when we do ceremony, there's always the use of the drum beat. I do a lot of journey work, and that is always done to the sound of the drum and the rattle. Okay. And again, it changes the brain waves and puts us more into a trance state, so that we can then access different parts of our imagination and our access into. If you will, otherworldly information.
Right, so the hypnagogic state. Are you familiar with which brainwaves? I know delta is sleep.
I don't have a science brain, so I know there's delta and theta, and the information is you can always look on Michael Harner websites. Will give you all the stats on how the brainwaves change, given so many beats a second. It's pretty quick. It's
nice. It usually drop down into that theta wave.
Exactly.
And really recondition our mind and take us into that dream state.
Right.
Cool. So you have your drum in the studio. Would you mind drumming a little bit for us? Sure. Maybe take our audience on maybe a little journey. All right. We've been talking for a second.
Sure.
Great.
So anyone who's listening, if you'd like to participate in a very short journey, I would just invite you to just begin to take a deep breath in. Breathing is everything. Breathing takes us where we want to go. And as you're breathing, imagine yourself in a garden. It can be any kind of garden. It can be a garden that exists in our backyard. It can be a tropical garden. It can be an otherworldly garden. My garden happens to be woody. And as you find yourself in this garden, continue breathing and just start looking around. And as you look around, kinds of flowers. And things might start appearing as you're looking around. And notice whether it's day or night. Notice whether there's light, and where that light is coming from. Notice the temperature of the air on your skin. Notice whether there are animals in your garden or birds. Notice if there's any water. Is there a waterfall or a pond? And as you walk around your garden, see if there's anything that needs to be cleaned up. Any old weeds or untended fauna, flora. And let that all be cleaned up. And then you'll notice that there's a place for you somewhere in that garden. Maybe a special seat, maybe a place where you stand. And take your place there. This is your special place. And state an intention that you would like to meet an animal spirit, one that can be with you from now on and in any other journey that you take. And just breathe and wait and see what occurs in this process. You may be thinking, am I making this up? Is this real? The answer is, yep, that's all that. So just allow it to happen. Keep breathing. And when this particular animal spirit shows up, you can ask it, are you my spirit animal? And usually you'll get some kind of affirmation. You'll either get a feeling in your body, or you'll get sometimes even a wink or a smile. And you can take a little quick journey with your animal. Let this being take you on a little journey. I'm going to give it about 2 minutes. So let it take you wherever it wants to go to show you something about you and your soul. same path. to find yourself back in your garden. And now that you're back in your garden, look around. Thank your spirit animal. And know that you can return back to your garden at any time. And do many, many journeys. You can ask questions. It's a good idea to have a very clear intention when you do a journey, rather than just go off on your own without a specific question. And it's good to have a guide, which you maybe have. So that's a conclusion of a very basic and simple journey that you can build on over time, because over many years.
Amazing. Thank you for bringing that to the studio today. Wow.
Yeah.
I really went fast. The garden was beautiful. The spirit animal joined me.
What'd you think?
Went off on a walk. I have a mountain lion that joins me in my garden, in my dreams and journeys quite often. So a beautiful experience. Thank you for taking us on that guided journey. I hope everyone enjoyed that and can reach out to you if they're interested in experiencing more.
Yeah.
Well, it's beautiful. I'm trying to focus on being in the studio now and in my body, and not in my. I'm half in the garden and half here in the studio, working on coming back out of that blissful moment right there. What are some? I'm just going to jump into another question while I settle in here. What are other techniques that you can bring clients when they come and visit you?
Now I have to get back into my
right.
Okay, let me see. Well, always the breath. Always the breath. The breath. Without the breath, you can practice these techniques, but it's really the breath that is the transformation. And so there are many, many different ways to do breath work.
Right.
And sometimes it's just simply taking 3 good deep breaths is one very, very simple tool.
And coming back into the present moment. It's very helpful.
Present moment, right, which we're doing
right now together. After that wonderful journey. Thank you again. Online it said illumination. What is illumination?
Illumination. So illumination is the practice of basically bringing in light. So in the traditional way that I've been trained in the Peruvian way, illumination is first we clear the energy body of dense and heavy energies. We actually use rocks to pull dense energies. And the person works through their breath to release those energies, those thought patterns, those memories, traumas, whatever they are.
Familiar.
And then at the end of the cycle, we bring in light. And that can be done, we all, as you know, we all have a light body all around us, and we can access that light from about 2 feet above our head.
Nice.
And we bring that, the shaman, the healer, will bring that light from themselves because they are experienced in sourcing that light into the other person. But also, that would be another thing that I will do in a session, even just, when I'm just sitting with a client, is teach them how to access their own higher light and bring it down.
Oh, that's valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. And another technique that's really, really useful and it's applicable in any setting is this is a Toltec technique called recapitulation.
Oh, what is that?
So let me just take a drink.
Sure. Just taking it.
Recapitulation is it's an ancient shamanic tool which utilizes the breath, and it's basically a returning of energies that we have accumulated from people and situations in our lives, and reclaiming our own energy. So, when we walk into a room, we leave part of our energy when we take on the energy of the room.
Right.
So over a lifetime, we accumulate a lot of energy.
Yes, we do.
Right? And so in the Toltec tradition, that is the technique. And I spent years working with recapitulation. And so it is simply, say, let's just say you had a bad experience at the grocery store with someone in line that day. And at the end of the day, you bring that memory, you run that memory in your mind back over again. And then I will picture that person in front of me, and I'll say, with love and gratitude, I return your energy to you. Strong breath, send it out. And then I'll breathe that as long as it still feels charged.
Right.
And then I'll say, with love and gratitude, I reclaim the energy, which is mine, and I pull my energy back. So with an inhale. And I keep doing that until the charge is finished.
Mm-hmm.
And then the most important thing is to re-inform with light. So then when the process is finished, then you can do it with your hands. You can pull light from the sun. You can pull light from the top of your head. And by bring that energy, that light energy into my heart to re-inform that thought pattern. So then it no longer becomes charged. It's done.
Beautiful. Great. Gosh, I do that several times a day.
Do
I
you?
recommend everyone take this technique and put it in your tool bag and use it after work. Anytime is a good time at the end of the day. Really sure. Great. Now, mine. Also, you were talking about extractions.
Oh, extractions.
So that might be a good segue from, sending energy back.
Metaphysical here. Okay, so, we're speaking in energetic terms here, right? And so I don't really like talking about this side of shamanism because I don't like the trauma drama part of it.
Right.
But it is true that sometimes, we don't like mosquitoes on us, right? They have a right to exist. They're here. They live with us, but we don't want them on us, right? Right. And we certainly don't want to swallow them. And sometimes there are energies that aren't so friendly, or that just don't have any place to go. And if we're particularly open or susceptible, we can take energies on that aren't necessarily helpful, or that can actually sometimes be harmful. And so there are shamanic techniques that work on relieving a person of any entities or any energies that don't belong in their system.
Nice. So there's that. But then the opposite would be, so that is releasing things that we don't need or that we've collected. And the opposite would be, I'm assuming, soul retrieval. So parts of ourselves.
Right, parts of ourselves. And I particularly love doing soul retrievals in my practice. So what's a soul retrieval? In psychology, we would call it split off parts of ourselves. So, when there's trauma, or great upset in our lives, very often, especially as children, because we have no way of coping with or understanding what's happening to us. Parts of ourselves still go someplace else. And So the job of the therapist or the shaman is to help the client bring parts of themselves that have been split off back here. Um, and so we can do that through talk therapy, but we can also do it energetically by literally going after, in shamanic terms, we call it going after parts of the soul.
Right. And I can definitely see where the shamanism bringing that spiritual aspect, and then the psychotherapy, focusing on the mind and the healing trauma that way. It's a beautiful relationship of the two.
Right.
That's great. Let's see. Why would what would draw a client to you? Like, what would they say? Like, okay, I'm experiencing X, Y, and Z. I'm going to call Antonia. So what do you offer? And why would they come and see you?
I have many reasons, I mean, I think that we live in a culture where there's a great deal of dissatisfaction, disharmony, unhappiness on so many levels. And I think that people are looking for ways to, I mean, in a very simplistic term, find greater happiness, find a way to access the self that they maybe don't even know about yet or have somehow lost. I think in a world that we're living in, it's so full of technology and so full of, everybody's on their iPhones. And not that there's anything inherently wrong with that, but we're losing our connection to nature. We're losing our connection to the natural parts of ourselves. And I think that when people reach out for help, they may not even consciously know what they're asking for. They may reach out to me because they're having trouble sleeping. But as we unpack, well, what's behind the trouble sleeping, and there's tremendous anxiety about being able to provide for his family and make a living. And then, well, if we unpack that even further, we're going to find earlier issues that have to do with safety, trauma, lack of safety. And so, anything that is rooted in some deeper level of distress can be unpacked and illuminated.
Great.
In a sense.
Great. So how would they find you?
Well, they can find me on my website, which we've mentioned a few times, www.antoniagreene.com. They can find me on psychologytoday.com. They can find me good old-fashioned phone, 206-465-9172. I also have a part-time practice in West Seattle at a place called Inner Alchemy, which is an office for energy healers and different modalities there once a week. And I work on Vashon.
Great. So easily accessible for us. You also lead groups. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I do. Well, I would love to talk about the Tote, which is coming up in August. The Tote, as I referred to earlier, is an all-night dreaming ceremony. And my husband and I produce them yearly now. We've been doing it for about 8 years. And I sometimes have invited guests to join me. Sometimes Francisco Rico, Luke Barrow, who you know. And it is a wonderful opportunity to dive deep into nature and self, into shamanic healing.
Wow, that sounds beautiful.
So that's coming up. That's August 24th, I believe. And you can sign up for that on our website. And I work with women a lot. Last year I had a program called the Spiral Medicine Wheel, which is a work that was, it was not an indigenous shamanism. It was designed and given to me. And I will be starting that again in September.
Oh, interesting.
And it's a program.
And you work with the divine feminine now. You've started incorporating that into your practice.
Yeah. It comes from a calling. And as you know, we're in a shift right now.
Yes, you are.
And it is the time of the feminine. And I think many of us, women, healers, teachers, artists, in all walks of life, women are being called to step up.
Definitely.
And
goosebumps.
To really let our voices be heard. And so, I feel that it's one of the things that I offer in terms of helping women feel empowered in their, there's lots of women's empowerment groups that are working on goals and external accomplishments, and this is more rooting ourselves into our own divinity and into the earth.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. Great. And could you tell us a little bit about, what that experience might be like if we attended, one of these workshops that you have around the divine feminine?
Yeah, well, we do a lot of journey work, just like we just did.
Nice.
And we do a lot of work with nature. We do a lot of work with the concept of harmony and community.
And what is that exactly?
Well, we talked about Ani earlier. Mm-hmm. It's the Peruvian concept of right relationship with all things. And I've learned a great deal from, particularly, I worked a little bit with the indigenous Kogi people in Colombia. And one of the things that I learned so profoundly through them is the necessity of making offerings. And it can be as simple as offering a breath. In Colombia, they use coca leaves, which we don't have here, but it can be as simple as walking outside in the morning and giving a breath to the sun, or giving a little bit of tobacco to a tree, which brings us into a right relationship with our soul selves. We're making an offering on our altar every day. So it's teaching women to develop practices, developing their own sense of internal sourcing.
I see.
The beauty, always the beauty, right?
And then when this airs, you would have just gotten back from a trip to Mexico, which I'm assuming, going to do again next year. Could you talk about that?
Definitely. So again, this trip to Teotihuacan, the place of the Toltecs and Aztecs and Mayans, place of pyramids, an incredibly sacred. It's one of the sacred places on the planet, I would say. Very, very high vibration place. And I plan to be doing those trips at least once a year. So this next one is coming up, which will be over, but next year probably in April.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what exactly do you do on those trips?
Oh, what do we do? Well, we spend each day out on the pyramid site. We have access to certain places in the pyramid site that tourists wouldn't be able to go.
Oh, wonderful.
One of the most sacred places to me is the place of the women. From time immemorial, gave birth. They assisted one another, they healed one another. It's an incredible, it's a very, very high vibration place. We climb the pyramids, we experience the ecstatic vibration of high solar energy, the pyramid of the sun, the pyramid of the moon. And it's a process. It's a process of letting go, of surrendering, and then of opening to the energies within ourselves and internally and externally. The energies that are accessible to us there. It's a very potent exchange. Yeah, and we work with two Kurindera Messi. We do sweat lodge, indigenous sweat lodge for them. And then we do processes in the dreaming house where we stay, which is a lovely and safe place. It's run by a Mexican family where we do journeys and we work there in the evening. And then we also spend a day in Mexico City. We go to the Basilica of Virgin Guadalupe.
Oh, wonderful.
Which is also on a very sacred site. And we go to the anthropology museum. So it's quite a spectacular trip.
Oh, fun. That sounds fantastic. I think I'm going to sign up next year.
You should.
That's great.
Yeah.
So travel and ceremony. So on your website, it says you do ceremony design. Can you explain that?
Yeah. Well, I'm available to do, to help anyone facilitate or design weddings, funerals, rites of passage, space clearings, anything that if a person's going through kind of a threshold experience. Sometimes it's really wonderful to mark that with some kind of ceremony or ritual. Right. So I'm available for those things, and I also offer fire ceremonies from time to time. It used to be a regular thing.
And what are those?
Fire ceremonies. We have a fire area on our property that is used exclusively for ceremony, and people gather and we sit by a fire, and there are different ways of doing fire ceremony. That there's not just one way to do it. Sometimes the purpose will be for release. Sometimes the purpose will be for gratitude. Sometimes the purpose will be for a world event that's happened. And I usually call a ceremony when I feel like it's time for a fire ceremony. I do them regularly.
Okay. Is there anything else that you do?
There's another thing called a despacho ceremony.
Oh, I've never heard of that before.
That is a Peruvian ceremony, which is very, very beautiful. It is. Okay, so how do I explain the despacho ceremony? It's because it's so tactile. So when you go to Peru and you go see a shaman, what you do is you do a despacho. And the shaman will say, what are your intentions? And you tell them. And they'll open a piece of paper, and then they'll start with sugar, and they'll make the 4-pointed cross for the 4 directions. And then they will start to create a mandala out of coca leaves. And then we use flowers here. And each coca leaf is prayed upon. So, the shaman will say a prayer into that coca leaf and place it, and in a particular way. And then another prayer, and then another prayer, and then another prayer. And so, if I'm doing a despacho for a group, we might have 100 flower petals on this mandala.
Wow.
And then there are many, many, many layers on top of the mandala that represent the earth, all the animals, all the four-leggeds, all the birds, the sun, the moon, the stars, the cosmos, everything beyond. And they're all represented with things like candies and cotton and little bits of paper and aromatics, sage, cedar.
Gosh, that sounds like a lot of fun.
It's beautiful. And then it's folded up, and you use it then to clear people's energy. And then the despacha is either buried, burned, or sent off into a body of water.
What a beautiful ceremony.
Yes,
Antonia, I could talk to you for so much longer. We have to wrap up. We have just a minute left. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's been a pleasure to have you in the studio. Again, you can find Antonia at www.antoniagreene.com. And thank you everyone for listening and joining me on this adventure this morning. I hope you have a great day, a great week, and I hope you get out there and raise the vibe. The views and opinions on this program are not necessarily those of the board, staff, underwriters, and donors of Voice of Vashon as an organization. VOV does not take political position. We do support our show hosts and their guests in expressing their views as long as they're not obscene or hate-mongering. This is Raise the Vibe on KVSH, Voice of Vashon, 101.9 FM. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great day.
Well,
wow, that went quick. Oh my God, I'm like, oh my God, I
can't believe how fast it went.
That was wild. That was awesome. I could have you back in to like talk about the divine feminine and all kinds of stuff. God, thank you so much. That was wonderful. People are going to love this interview.
I enjoyed the exchange.
Let's wrap up online. Thank you everyone for joining us online. That was a great interview with Antonia. Antonia, is there anything that you want to share with our live stream before we go this morning?
I just feel very grateful, and thank you so much, Liz, for bringing this level of consciousness onto the air.
Thank you, Antonia. My pleasure. Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great day.